As we close out Black History Month, we turn now to a remarkable but often overlooked chapter of U.S. history, one that connects the United States to the West African nation of Liberia, founded more than 2 centuries ago by freed African Americans. ABC's Ines de La Cuetara takes us on a journey through history to see how their legacy and their search for freedom continues to shape a country known as the Land of Liberty.
You'd be forgiven for thinking this is somewhere in America. From the street signs to the yellow school buses and monuments like this Masonic temple, even a flag that looks very familiar. But we're a long way from the U.S. This is Liberia, a small nation on the western coast of Africa, and its story is intrinsically tied to America's. It's a little-known chapter in U.S. history. In the 1800s, a group of white Americans created what was known as the American Colonization Society. Its aim was to repatriate formerly enslaved Americans to Africa, even though many had been in the U.S. for generations. Liberian historian Dr. C. Patrick Burroughs.
They aimed to form a colony in Africa and to have free blacks who chose to leave and go to Liberia. They were joined by people who were politicians and who thought that the repatriation of blacks to Africa was important to preserve stability in the U.S. That as long as free blacks were here, they would influence those who were enslaved, and those who were enslaved might rebel.
The ACS set about buying land in Africa and chose to call it Liberia. In other words, the land of the free. Its capital, Monrovia, was named after U.S. President James Monroe. Among those who would make the journey was William D. Coleman, a young boy who'd grown up on the Wardlaw plantation in Fayette County, Kentucky. James Wardlaw's will shows that upon his death, he wanted all enslaved people on his plantation to be liberated on the condition they emigrate to Liberia. Wardlaw adding, "But such of my slaves as decline going to Liberia shall be sold as slaves." Dr. Burroughs says records show that in 1853, William, his mother Ellen, and an uncle boarded a ship in Baltimore and set sail for Liberia.
Life was rough because you're coming into a place that's new, certainly not as rough as it would have been on a plantation, and now you're working for yourself.
Eventually, the Colemans landed here in what was dubbed Kentucky in Africa, where relics of the past still stand to this day, and where we met up with some of Coleman's direct descendants.
From the time they came in, they started patterning things after the United States. The flag, the everything.
It's estimated about 15,000 freed black Americans resettled in Liberia. They set about building a country based on what they knew, overcoming some challenges from the local population. In the Liberian jungle, one can still find buildings that look almost identical to those in the American South.
These are the buildings that people who came from the U.S. had built. The structures on, say, Jefferson's plantation or Madison's plantation were not built by Jefferson himself. He might have designed them, but the actual enslaved people were the ones who built them. So they had those skills.
At this Baptist church in 1847, Liberians even signed their own Declaration of Independence.
It was a land of freedom, and it still is, regardless of what the issues are. Liberia is still a land of freedom. Anyone can come and settle in Liberia, true land of liberty.
And William D. Coleman, born enslaved on an American plantation, would eventually grow up to become the nation's 13th president. But the Coleman search for freedom wouldn't end there. Decades later, during the brutal Liberian Civil War, a portion of the family chose to flee the violence by heading back to America. Outside of Washington, D.C., we meet 93-year-old Genevieve Coleman Garnett and her son James.
When you get married, right?
19 years old.
19 years old. Okay, and this was in 1951. I don't think anybody ever planned to come back, But when the coup took place, thank God we had a place of refuge that we could come back to, and settle again and try to start all over, But, America and Liberia have always had a very close relationship. It's a full cycle, right?
Every year now, the Colemans hold a big family reunion What began in 1998 as a small core gathering of Colemans has now blossomed into a massive event with as many as 300 American and Liberian Colemans attending.
We hope that they don't get mixed up and don't know who they are. We wanted them to know them, who they were and where they came from.
A chance to reflect on their shared legacy and give back. The descendants of William D. Coleman also created a foundation aimed at rebuilding the nation that gave them liberty.
You know, life is better here, than it is over there. We got to continue to work, though, and remember, who we are, why we came, where we came from, and do what we can to help the situation over there.
An important part of history. Ines de La Cuetara, thank you.